Hi and welcome to Climate Camp TV. We've got two speakers today to talk about happiness and growth. Can we have both? They just come straight from one of the workshops we've got going at the camp, and I'll let them introduce themselves. So, Saamah?
Hello, I'm Saamah from the New Economics Foundation.
I'm Caroline Lucas. I'm a Green Party member of the European Parliament and leader of the Green Party, and in fact we've just been talking about redefining the question, and the question we like better is it possible to be happy without growth?
Okay, so Saamah, you talk a lot about well-being. What exactly do you mean by well-being?
Well, well-being is very simple. It's how people feel about their life. It's about their experience of their life. It's more than just happiness. It's more than just smiling. It's about people functioning well in life as well. It's about your social relations. It's about your psychological resources. But the important thing is it's things that we need to measure by asking people how they feel. We can't measure it with a thermometer or with a balance sheet.
So how do we measure well-being?
Well, by asking people in surveys with well chosen questions.
And how do you feel this relates to our economy and our banks and our politicians at the moment? Do you think these are the kind of questions that we have been asking?
Well, we have been asking questions about well-being in the past, but they've never been taken that seriously. They've always been seen as a sort of a sideshow. And what we're trying to do is show that, well, 30 years on with the psychological research, we're getting better at asking these questions, and we can realise that we can actually take them seriously, and that when people say how they feel, that they mean it. Which means that we can start using it to shape our policies. So we can think, well, how can our policies be chosen which actually make people happy, rather than just thinking about what they do in terms of economic growth, which is what's been the focus of most policy at the moment.
So Caroline, you work of course a lot in policy and so on. Do you feel that the Green Party at the moment is taking good attention of well-being in terms of its policy making?
I'd argue that we've been dealing with well-being for very many years. In fact, the New Economics Foundation grew out of the Green Party many years ago, so we are the godfather, if you like, a part of this idea, or the godmother. But I think what's interesting about the well-being debate just now is how it can influence the debate on climate change. I think politicians are terrified of putting in place the kind of ambitious policies that we need, because they think they're going to have to tell people they're going to have to change massively the things that they do. And the good news about the well-being debate is that if we can say, yes, there will be changes, but actually these are changes that are going to make us feel better off in terms of our internal sense of self, in terms of our communities, stronger communities, that in many ways our well-being is going to improve under these changes. That to me is what excites me about the well-being debate, because I think it might be something that can help wrench the debate around and get politicians to realise that actually if they communicated about climate change rather differently, they could be much more ambitious, they could have much more courage to go much further when it comes to the kinds of policies we need to implement.
Now, of course, at the camp here we're demonstrating all sorts of ways that our lives can be better and perhaps have more well-being in them, whether it's through cycling to make energy, living, setting up these lovely tents, doing things together and so on. How do you think politicians can be directly involved in this, though? At the camp we're very much into saying that we don't need leaders and we don't need bosses to implement these changes. So where do you think politicians fit in?
I think that we do need both. I mean, I love Climate Camp. I think the importance of Climate Camp is showing what's possible. It's showing that you can create another kind of community with very different values, and that people can have a lot of fun in doing it at the same time. What's happening here is people are sharing tools, they're sharing creative ideas about how they can change their communities from the bottom up. That is absolutely vital. But I do believe it's also vital to have policy change from a national and an international level as well, not least because this whole debate is so urgent. We don't really have time to convince each and every individual one by one as we go along about the importance of changing behaviour. We've got to enable people to make changes. For example, people on lower incomes who are going to find some of this very difficult. We need a government that's going to put in place the policies to enable everybody to shift to more sustainable ways of living. And that's why I think politicians need to be absolutely engaged with this debate at the same time as we have the real trailblazers here at Climate Camp showing the way forward.
So, Saamah, I'm just going to bring you in here. We're talking about aspirations and so on in the workshop, and Caroline's just mentioning maybe people on lower income have different aspirations, or we need to talk about how we can collectively have aspirations. How do you feel well-being fits into this?
Well, I think that there is an element of people's aspirations being shaped by external influences. Of course, we're shaped by what we're told and what we're what we're told in school, and then what we're told by advertising, for example. And so, an important element of a shift towards well-being and a shift towards a society which is less structured around economic growth and less structured around sort of material consumption. It has to be a shift in the aspirations, and that comes partly by, for example, restrictions on advertising, for example. so that people, which we know, for example, in Sweden, they have restrictions against advertising against children because, they've found out, they know that there's plenty of literature which shows that this kind of advertising is going to leads to detriments to well-being, detriments to health, and all sorts of other things. The interesting thing is that also it leads to detriments to the environment because advertising encourages materialism, which of course leads to the consumption the consumption explosion which we have at the moment, which is destroying our planet.
So I think this is where it all kind of really hinges on, is that climate change is being caused perhaps by us having the wrong kind of ideas about well-being, by having the wrong ideas about how we can be happy. So what might be some immediate things that we can do in order to be both happier and to actually avoid catastrophic climate change?
Well, as you say, we need to redefine our vision of progress, and that's the most important thing. We need governments which are constantly writing in their strategies that we need to have economic growth, or even more laughably, sustainable economic growth, which is an oxymoron in itself. There's such a big part of this does need to happen at the government level. It does need to happen in terms of legislation, in terms of policies. But as individuals, we can do very simple things. I think I always use this as the simplest example is the way we transport ourselves, the way we go to work. If you were to tell someone that they could change their lifestyle in a way which would mean that they would be healthier, happier, and save money and maybe even save time, then people would jump at it. And one of those examples would be cycling. If you cycle instead of driving to work, there's plenty of research which shows that people actually feel that cycling satisfies their needs more than using their car. And so you can get people doing that without even mentioning the word environment. And so these are sort of quick, these are simple things that people can do at the individual level, but then also need those sort of local government and central government support to make that as a more feasible option for everyone.
So Caroline, just to turn to you again, do you think that while we're talking about collective action or individual action that we can take, Saamah's saying that the kind of individual things that we can do are changing the way that we get to work and so on. But surely the way that we produce things, the way that we run factories and so on, involves the workers in those factories as well, involves people who are at the camp, involves people working on a grassroots level. So do you think that perhaps there could be a solid workers' movement involved in how we affect well-being and how we affect climate change?
I think that a solid workers' movement is absolutely critical. It's absolutely critical that trade unions are on the forefront, as they are increasingly, when it comes to the debates around climate change. And of course the demonstrations outside the Vestas factory were a perfect example of where a new alliance, I think, is being forged, where people who are traditionally from the union background and people from a more green background are coming together and recognising that they really do have a shared agenda here. That's incredibly exciting, so that's vital. But just to come back to, for example, the instance that Saamah gave about, people can choose to go by bike or they can choose to get a bus. They can get a bus as long as there are bus services there, and that comes back to making sure we give people real alternatives. It makes me very angry when you've got a government that will say to people, leave your car behind, do something different, and then don't provide, if you live in a rural area, for example, they don't provide a bus service after 6 o'clock, and the buses and trains that we have in this country are the most expensive in Europe. So that's why we need real government action at the same time to enable all of the fantastic ideas that are being developed here to be scaled up and multiplied really quickly.
Great, well that's all we've got time for. Caroline and Saamah, thanks very much. Thanks for watching.